Welcome to the Don't Be Ridiculous. I'm sorry, not Don't Be Ridiculous. Questionable Calls podcast. Still can't get that name out of my head. We've had a little break for a while. Took a little break for the summer. I've kind of been distracted by a few other things, but it's good to be back. Clark, good to see you.
Yep.
And we've got a few things going on now, but we're about a month away from a little bit more than a month away from football starting back up. So probably be on here every week at that point. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what's really looking forward. This week I kind of got into reading about college football and getting ready for some of the big games this year. So looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, Clark, as they say, Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins quarterback, got himself a bag. So they just signed a 4-year extension for $212 million. So it's about $53 million per year, which makes him, if you do it on an average annual salary basis, makes him the third highest paid quarterback in the league. So, my initial thoughts are, we knew this was going to happen. We were, I was expecting this. No part of me is surprised by them giving this contract, especially when in the, after the season was over, a lot of the guys that they had left, Christian Wilkins and so forth. So you could tell that the team was preparing themselves to, offer Tua this contract, and that was the way that it was going to be. But anytime now that anytime these quarterback contracts come out, it tends to be a big topic on all the sports shows. And is this guy worth it? And did they make a mistake? And all this nonsense. But yeah, once they gave him the contract, okay. But Clark, it basically, like, it's funny to me, and the one sticking point that I seem to have is, well, what are the Dolphins supposed to do? They haven't won a playoff game in 25 years. What are they? What are they? What other move are they supposed to make? And what I would just like to say is, yeah, has the team gotten better in the last 25 years? Like, are we any closer to like winning playoff games or contending for the Super Bowl than we were, in 2000 when they won their last playoff game?
You could argue they are, but I mean, yeah, I would. Okay. Yeah, I would argue they are, just given the fact that and I have to put a caveat on this. Their offense is really good against bad teams. So they're able to put up a lot of stats. And they have Tyreek Hill's a Hall of Fame wide receiver who's one of the best wide receivers I've ever seen. Okay. So, and they did win 11 games last year. But if you want to argue from the other side that they're not closer, they won 11 games. They should have won 12. Okay. They had a huge lead on the Bills, and they still couldn't win the division and get a home playoff game. So, from that perspective, maybe they're really not that much closer, because if you couldn't get into position to get a home playoff game last year, then I don't know what to tell. Like, that just doesn't seem. I mean, the fact that Tua stayed healthy all year. So, but we can get into the other stuff with Tua. I don't want to diverge off topic from what the question you asked, but yeah, that's kind of where I would see it. I mean, I guess you could say they are closer because they made the playoffs 2 years in a row, but just in terms of actually being able to win a playoff game, I just don't see how they're going to get a home game, which is kind of what they need to do to be able to, to be able to win one, because they're not going to be able to win one in cold weather. So,
Yeah, I think that basically the Dolphins have now locked themselves into. I was going to say I've been trying to figure out how I want to phrase this, but I was going to say they've locked themselves into middle class jail. But I think a better way to say it is they've they got like the Dolphins got an inherit. It's like somebody gets an inheritance from a relative, and they're able to buy a house in a neighborhood that they wouldn't normally be able to live in. And it's like, it's great, they've got the house, but you know they can barely afford to mow the lawn,
yeah,
and
they're house poor. That's what you call it.
right, House poor. Yeah, there you go. So they've got the house in this really nice neighborhood, and that's great. But there's no way they can't sell it, and there's nothing they can do, and they're basically tapped out. So they've the Dolphins have now locked themselves into this position in the middle where it's like So that's kind of my argument is people saying, well, what are they supposed to do? It's like, okay, but the results aren't changing. Like they haven't changed the results. Like you can tell me all, well, the team's better and blah blah blah. You can tell me all that. They still can't win the division. Once the Patriots basically took over, the Dolphins haven't been able to win the division, in forever. And um, they're stuck where they are. And I just don't see how they're going to get better. Now, the only caveat is, they got the coach is a better coach than we've had, and I can't remember when. And they've got
Since
Tyreek
Jimmy
Hill, who's
Johnson.
right, yeah, and they've got Tyreek Hill, who's one of the best players in the league. Forget position; he's just one of the best football
Yeah,
players in the NFL. And
I
so
think.
that would
Yeah, go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's what I would say. The difference is, but it's like, am I supposed to be excited about this? Like, it's just how do I get it's like, how am I supposed to be excited about, we basically ensured we're never going to be any better than we've been, and we're going to continue, and the other thing is, like, how do I know the team's not going to be worse? They had to let a bunch of guys go, and they positioned themselves to be able to sign this contract, and it's like, what am I supposed to be excited about this?
Yeah. So I think. Okay. So I'll come at this from the perspective of some other people who are like, oh, what are they? What else are they supposed to do? So you can defend signing him to another contract. I can understand how you could do that. It's like, well, the way that they've constructed the system on offense, he works within that system, and yes, that's true. He does. Okay, with what the how they've constructed things, it's like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, um, and so if you want to say, well, so I get that, but then it becomes like, well, you have to make him the third highest paid quarterback in the league. He's not the third best quarterback in the league. Like, that's totally clear, and then people say, well, but that's how they're doing the contracts. Well, okay, fine. That can be a separate conversation about quarterback contracts and how it's gotten ridiculous. We're paying the position and not paying the player in terms of the results and how good we can project him to be, you know. So that's kind of ridiculous. But okay, fine. All right. So if you want to say that like, okay, you're fine with them signing this, then okay, I can live with that. Okay. But you guys need to stop with, he's an ascending player. I've heard that like 5 times, and I'm like, guys, stop it. Okay. What does that even mean? Okay. He's The last 2 years, he's basically been the same player. Okay. And if you think there's another level beyond this, then you must think that he's going to grow 3 inches or something, 3 inches taller, and his arm's just going to magically get much stronger. Like, I don't really see how that's going to happen. Okay. So we've kind of figured out what he is. Defenses know what he is. That's why when he plays good teams, they can stop him. Okay. So we know what he is. We know what he's basically going to be. Maybe he'll improve on the margins or something. He gets more experience, whatever. McDaniel figures out how to better call a game. They get a running game that's more dynamic where they can actually run into the offensive line, rather than just to the to the outside toward the sideline. They do those zone run things. So yeah, the team could potentially be better. Okay. And then you're basically saying the ceiling is make the playoffs. Maybe if everything goes perfectly, maybe you win a playoff game. Like, everything goes perfectly, or like you're playing the other team and their quarterback gets injured in the middle of the game, or they just suffer a rash of injuries at the end of the year and you're playing a depleted team and you're able to beat them. Like, something like that. Okay. And if you're cool with that, because the offense is fun to watch, if you're cool with the offense being fun to watch and you can make the playoffs, or you at least have a shot to make the playoffs every year — I don't think they're going to make the playoffs every year — then okay, fine. But do not try to sell me on this stuff where he's an ascending player or he's elite or so. Just stop. Okay. Trevor Lawrence is better than Tua. Okay. I don't care. You're like, oh, well, look at the win-loss record. Stop it. I've watched them both play. Trevor Lawrence is better than him. Okay. Dak Prescott's better than him. Joe Burrow's better than him. Justin Herbert is better than him. It's like, oh, what about I don't care about the win-loss record and whatever else. Justin Herbert is a better player than Tua will ever be. Okay? A lot of that's a function of his height and his arm strength, but, whatever. So that's my main thing. Like, look, they're going to be locked into this, and we'll kind of see how it goes, but you guys need to be more realistic about your expectations, okay? Yeah, they made the playoffs 2 years in a row, but last year their schedule was really beneficial for a lot of it, where there were just a bunch of bad teams that they were able to beat. Okay, they've got some really good teams on their schedule this year, and I'm hearing some people going, "Oh, I don't know what to expect from the Bills this year." Stop it. Okay. Oh, they lost Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs is way past his prime. That does not matter. Okay. You saw, like, Stephon Diggs wasn't really a factor when he was playing them last year in the regular season, and you saw what happened in the last game of the regular season. The Dolphins couldn't do a damn thing. Okay. Josh Allen was screwing around, spotting them turnovers, and they still couldn't win. So I don't, and people we can talk about the Jets maybe, but it's like forget that. I'm still the division still goes through Buffalo, and I just don't see how you're expecting all this different stuff from Tua. Look, if you just want to stabilize the position and whatever else, fine, okay, but just please be honest with me about what the actual ceiling is, because there are some people who are being honest about it, and other people are like, oh well, no, it's just their defense. No, it is not just their defense. I've watched enough of Tua. I know exactly what he is. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I like everything you said there. And one thing that kind of stood out to me, I was watching First Things First, and Nick Wright was like, the advantage of having a rookie quarterback is that you get to put this all star team around him, right? And he was
Yeah.
using San Francisco as the example, and I'm going, yeah, but the Dolphins didn't even get that. We didn't even get the all star team. We didn't get the
Right.
San Francisco level roster. We got, so it's like we didn't even get, and that's the sad part, is like the Dolphins didn't even get to fully enjoy the whole rookie contract thing, because the first 2 years Tua was pretty bad. And then they finally got the coach right, and everything changed. So it's just, there's a clear line of demarcation for what you can clearly see which games Tua is going to succeed in and which games he isn't. I can call it out before the season starts. So it's just, it's yeah,
And
that's
by the
that's
way, let me just point out to people, okay? You guys really need to understand this. Tyreek Hill better keep playing at the Hall of Fame level we're used to. Because if he starts to decline, then you can forget it. Okay? Like, people need to understand this. You've said this, and it's true. Tyreek Hill saved Tua's career. Okay? I love Jalen Waddle. That was a great draft pick. He's not Tyreek Hill. Okay? So Tyreek better keep playing like this for another few years, because otherwise you can forget even sniffing the playoffs.
yeah. I think that oh god, I can't remember what I was going to say. But yeah, it's we didn't get the, I just feel like we didn't maximize the the time that we had where he was incredibly cheap, because it took the team so long. And yeah, what I wanted to say was, if this team was built correctly, or the best built in a way that, could sustain winning, it would be different. But the team's not built correctly. The offensive line's still not great, and it's probably not going to be better this year than it was last year, and it wasn't good last year. And Armstead's another year older, so it's a matter of, if they have built this team, in a better way. Like, if Tua is the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, it's probably fine. Like, they're probably great, you know, but the Dolphins basically they've made it very difficult for them to win, and especially with all the injuries they had at the end of the year, with losing the two defensive linemen, and then, guys leaving in free agency. Like, they've made this very very difficult, to navigate. But the bottom line is, we're this is where we are for the next I mean, this year's not included in the contract, so basically 4 to 5 years, this is kind of where we are. So
And look, I hope Tua doesn't get hurt,
right.
but the probability is not good, especially because they've lost a bunch of players in the offseason. Like, and now it's like, oh, Tua lost. I mean, you know, I guess maybe they're going to try to have him roll out a little more or something because he lost all that weight. So maybe they're thinking he can be a little bit quicker or something. But I mean, you know, he goes out of the pocket like he's risking getting hit, and that's not really a good thing for him. So, and he was healthy all last year, but if you really think that that's just going to be the trend now, like I don't see it.
Yeah, and what let's lead into the next topic here. What I want to talk about was, I mean, these contracts going to the average quarterback getting these really high contracts. I mean, this just comes down to scarcity. That's all this is. This is just there's only so many quarterbacks. And there were 60 something quarterbacks that played last year. So there's only a handful that are serviceable. There's a small handful that are really good, and there's a small handful behind them that are kind of serviceable, and then after that, I mean, you don't know what you're getting. So it's like, the general manager wants to keep his job, right? he so he wants to do it, right? The coach is not going to sign off on let's start over at quarterback, because coaches get fired at the drop of a hat now. So
Yeah,
they're not going to resist it. So, so the state of quarterback contracts, right? We've had Trevor Lawrence signed. Now he's the highest paid quarterback, right? We got Jared Goff and Tua just signed, pretty similar deals. Nobody thinks that they're elite or special. Nobody in their right mind, anyway. And so, the way that football works now, because of rule changes and because of a few different things, the rule change dictate that the quarterback is the most important person on your team, and therefore has to be highly paid, regardless of whether they're the best player on your team or not. They're going to be your highest paid player. That's just the way that it works. And they were complaining about this. I was listening to on FS1. I was listening to Speak, and James Jones, the former Green Bay Packer, which wide receiver, was complaining about this. Well, I mean, I don't understand. Brandon Ayuk can't get his deal because they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy in a year, and that's it's like, why can't we have the highest paid player on your team actually be the best player on your team? Why can't Justin Jefferson be, you know, the highest paid player on the Vikings, even though he is now, but that's because they have
yeah,
quarterbacks on cheap deals. But and it's so he's like, we got to get a little bit, and it's all very simple, basic economics. Like I just told you what the answer was, and the answer is just value. Quarterbacks are more valuable. Period. You can argue that they're not, but you're going to be losing games, and you know that's what the sport comes down to. So is that what we want? Is this what's I know this is what's best for entertainment value. This is what's best, what the NFL wants. This is what the TV networks want. I get that. But is that what, is that what we want when there's so few? Like, I mean, honestly, Clark, when you think about it, are there fewer good quarterbacks than like NBA basketball stars? Like, is it so like minuscule? Like, it's like, yeah, obviously we'd all love to draft Patrick Mahomes. I get it. There's only one of those.
yeah,
So we're not, so likelihood is your team's not going to get that one of those guys. But if you don't have one of those guys, or you've got to have a guy like, Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford or one of those guys who, if you put the right roster around them, that can elevate them to where they can compete for Super Bowls.
yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if this is, I understand the number is going to go up because the salary cap keeps going up and all this stuff. But this is where we're at with quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes is now the 10th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So is
Yeah.
this what
Well,
we
I mean,
want?
I will say this: the cap will go up.
Right.
So, like these contracts, I feel like there's going to be like 2 years where it's like it kind of hurts you, where it's like the cap hit is whatever. So yeah, it's not as bad as like, oh, this is going to be a huge cap hit all 4 years of the contract. It's not really, but it's still, yeah, it still hamstrings you a little bit, and it makes things tougher. And the thing is, if you're going to do that, if you have a guy like Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow or whoever else, like their talent level and their ability to rise up and play even better can carry you through that. But when you're paying guys who are, I mean, like the Lions are fine because they've got a really good roster on offense around them. So that's totally fine. Like that totally works with Jared Goff. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. But with the Dolphins, like you said, like you kind of got some problems there. So then it can kind of make it more difficult. And then like the Cowboys, for instance, we'll see if they end up paying Dak another contract, but like they're like I think some people get the idea that they're like really talented or something. And I'm like, not really. Like their offensive line's been getting older for a few years now. They have one really reliable receiver. Um, their defense is basically like two like impact players, and then everybody else is just kind of whatever. So like, yeah, then it becomes tough. Then it makes it really tough to like, you know, rise to another level because you just don't have enough of the rest of the guys on the team.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, I'm an acceptance of what the NFL is now. It just kind of makes me wonder, like, if you don't, like, there's now more than ever, and I've been saying this for, a few years on this show, that, you got to have that guy. And if you don't, like, you're going to be on my not going to the Super Bowl list.
Yeah.
Like the not going to the Super Bowl list is getting longer by the minute. Like, I feel like every year it's just like, there's about 6 teams, and then everybody else I can basically just toss out. And so it's just kind of that's kind of that kind of makes it disappointing. Like, it's funny, like, people talk about competitive balance and parity. Like, I think there's more competitive balance like in college football than there is in the NFL. And maybe I'm insane, maybe that sounds nuts, and whatever. And but
Yeah, no, that might
it's
be kind of true because yeah,
in
I mean
basketball
like
for sure.
yeah, I mean there's just like if you don't I mean it's just you got to understand if you really do not have one of those elite quarterbacks like forget it. I mean just, forget it. I mean and like um Detroit like I'm trying to think of so Detroit played the Rams who, the Rams were I would argue Stafford's better than um Jared Goff. But, they beat the Rams like that was a tough game and then they played the Bucks. And the Bucks are, they're okay. They got a decent roster, and like Mayfield had a good year last year, but like, they're not like unbelievable. And then they got to the 49ers, and they actually played really well. Um, but yeah, it's just like if you get into a game with another guy who's really elite, which the NFC is a little bit different. Like the NFC, it makes more sense. In the AFC, like, dude, if you don't have one of those like 4 or 5 dudes, like, forget it.
Yeah, and I mean, we say that, but I mean, Brock Purdy made it to the Super Bowl, right? And now I would argue that's
In
an
the
outlier
NFC, I mean,
because
so
San Francisco is an outlier, right? And Jared
yeah,
Goff they had a 17-point lead in the NFC Championship game, so they were almost there. But to me, what I would say to that is, yeah, give me that roster. Give me Tua with one of those rosters. Then, oh, okay, then it changes the entire equation because
yeah.
those
But the
teams are
Dolphins have not
literally.
shown the ability to draft a lot of guys who end up being starters who are like big time contributors to the team. I mean, there's Jalen
And this
Waddle
is
and like
And I was thinking about this earlier. Like, the Dolphins would have been better off just tearing the entire thing down. Instead, because they had drafted well, they had a couple of guys that they were going to have to pay, so their roster just got to be too highly paid. The drafting, Xavier Howard they kept for a long time. Christian Wilkins they drafted and they kept him for a while. So if it's hard. Like, you go through 4 or 5 years where you're bad, and you just because you get 4 or 5 guys that are pretty good. So when all those guys come due, by the time your team gets good, because it takes a couple of years, you're kind of stuck. And that's kind of where I feel the Dolphins are. Like, if I feel like if they'd have really just torn it down to the studs and started over, it would have been better off a few years ago. But regardless, he got his money, and we'll watch a Dolphins team that's competitive. And that goes back to what I've been saying the whole time is I think the owner's fine with it. I think the owner is fine with the Dolphins just being reasonably competitive. I don't think they have necessarily what you want. But what the Dolphins do what you want to do is create a team that's ready, so when a quarterback becomes available, you can try to get him. And so
yeah.
that's kind of
And
how I
if the
look at.
Dolphins want to get out of this contract, I think they sort of can after the second year of it. But remember, the second year of the contract does not start for 3 years, or excuse me, for two
Mm, right.
for two
You're
years
right.
because this is the fifth year option year.
Right. Yeah. So after 2026. Yeah. Um, yeah. So all right. So moving on to some things that I've been chewing on lately. So I've been looking at a lot of we just had all the college football conference media days and everything last couple of weeks. And so, a lot of content's been coming out about that. And I'm listening to this is one thing like if you've been watching this podcast at all, one thing about college football, these things that frustrate me about the way that the media acts about certain things. And so I'm listening to the College Football Inquirer's podcast by Yahoo Sports. So they have Dan Wetzel and Pat Forty and Ross Dellinger on there, once or twice a week now. I think it's kind of getting back in the swing, and with all the media days, they've been having a lot of episodes coming out every week. And so they were talking about games they're looking forward to this season, and just they were like, well, I think it was what Dan Wetzel, I think, was like, boy, I really don't like this conference realignment stuff with all these teams moving conferences, but I'll tell you what, there's going to be a lot of good games this year. And it just kind of made me just laugh. It just, if I had any hair left, I wanted to pull it out, because it's just like, you guys literally, there's these are part of the media members that have spent the entire offseason complaining about how this is bad for college football and all they care about is money. And I don't understand why the Big Ten wants all these spots in the playoff, and all this complaining going on. What do you guys want to expand the playoff again? What's wrong with you? And all this stuff. And then it's like, oh, but you're acknowledging, oh, the product's really good and this is really going to be a fun season. It's like, well, I'm sorry that, they're not doing it exactly the way that you want, but do you want a better sport, like, that's more entertaining for a longer period of time with better games? Like, do you want that or not? Like, I just
Right.
don't understand. Like, it's like these things that, oh my God, what are we going to do about, all of these, conference realignment, and what are we going to do about the NIL and the transfer portal? These are small prices to pay for the sport as a whole to get better. And I think college football had one of the best years it's had in my lifetime last season. The playoff mess aside, you know, it, that it got pretty stupid at the end there. But regardless, the season was still awesome anyway. And now we're getting this year a 12-team playoff, so we're going to get what I looked at the schedule, like 4 or 5 more days of legitimate, really good college football games that we'll get to watch. And so I don't understand. I don't understand the hemming and hawing about it. I don't understand any argument that isn't, this is great for the sport. Like, let's do this. I don't get it. And the other point that I wanted to make was, I'm listening to Josh Pate does the Late Kick podcast, and he's basically lamenting, and I don't think he said that anything recently, but in previous episodes, he's been basically complaining that no, it's not what's best. The expanding the playoff is not what's best for the sport. It's not what I want. And this, leaning into this argument that, well, what was wrong with what we had before, or it was perfectly fine, the way that it was, and we're now going to devalue the regular season, and what are we doing? And it's just like, guys, college football wasn't fine. That's not my opinion. That's not a, oh well, you could go any way or want on that. You could be on this side or that side. No, the sport had major problems. Like, that wasn't like an issue. It was a constant complaint by everybody. Okay? It had the only reason that it's held together was because of the bowls had too much power, you know, to anybody to give it away to them. And once you, plus the media had been able to vote on the national champion for so long, once you try to take power away from them, boy, oh, we can't have that. So it just turned into this power struggle, and none of you really care about what's best for the sport. I think that's the conclusion that I've come to at this point. That you know people want what's in their interest. They don't really care about what's best for the sport. And I'm sorry, there's no argument other than expanding the playoff is good for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna, like, there's gonna be a lot of good games, and we're gonna get more. The postseason is gonna be longer, so, and there's gonna be more matchups that we're not used to seeing between teams in different parts of the country and teams in different, uh, well, given how conferences are changing, teams that were in different conferences playing each other. So that's going to be like, whether it's in the regular season or maybe again, like we can get rematches in the playoffs. So I think that's gonna be really fun, you know. So yeah, and I don't think like I'm looking at it and it's like I really don't think. I mean, well, no, I shouldn't say that. The media will try to gin stuff up and get it really in your face, but I just really don't think the arguments we're going to be having at the end of the season about who's in and who's out. Um, I don't really think that's going to matter as much because I feel like any of the teams that we really think are really good are going to get in. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe there's like one team that you're like, oh, you can make an argument, but they're probably going to have like 3 losses, and we're going to be like, you lost 3 games, so
yeah, I mean that's the like you and I were talking about this week. It's not the best 12 teams. Like I think we need to clear that up. This is playoff is not going to be the best 12 teams, guys. I think we'll have about the best 8 teams, what I would say. And then we'll get some we'll get some pretenders that really wouldn't
yeah,
be
I
in
mean,
there if
it's
they
like
weren't.
guys, when they're saying automatic bid for the conference champion, like yeah, whoever wins those one of those 4 conferences, they're going. So automatic bid. So yeah, that's going to be because in years past we've had teams make the playoff and they didn't win the conference. Like they were really good all year and then they just lost the conference championship. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out, I guess.
Yeah, I think yeah, it just again, I just can't I just shake my head at the media because it's like the people who, the way the media gets paid, right? Is for more content, more games, more good stuff, expand the playoff, but then they all complain about it.
Right.
It's like it's just unbelievable to me. It just blows my mind the hypocrisy that goes on. It's just like have you looked in the mirror lately, guys? Like I don't know what mythical sport you think this is, but and by the way, if you want to get rid of the playoff altogether, that's fine. Let's just do let's do let's make this the English Premier League. We'll play the regular season, then we'll just crown a champion. Now,
Well, and also, like, I would say that, like, while I'm a little bit concerned about some of the games at the end of the year not mattering, I don't think it's going to be maybe as bad as I might have feared, possibly. I think for the most part, when you go through the first, 2.5 months of the season, like, you're going to want to win pretty much all your games. I
yeah.
mean, you can get a loss, right? And you could maybe get 2 losses. 3 losses is really pushing it. So you're still going to want to I mean, going undefeated, yeah, that's great. You're probably in. But one loss doesn't necessarily kill you, depending on when it happens. And then 2 losses may not even kill you. So like there's gonna have more of a chance. So that's gonna take away some of the like, oh god, we lost, we're done. But you're still going to have to win a lot of your games. So the regular season is still going to matter. It's just there may be some games at the end where you're like, okay, well we know who's getting in. We don't really need to play this game or whatever. So, but that doesn't. I don't think that's necessarily going to matter that much. I mean,
Well,
go, go.
what I think the scenario that you're going to have to worry about is because conference championship games, right? Teams are going to play hard in that game anyway. You want to win your conference to get the automatic bid, so you don't have to worry about that. The games I worry about would be like the last game of the regular season, right? Especially when we're talking about the ACC or the Big 12, right? Let's say because the thing is, one of those two conferences could just beat the hell out of each other, and so you could give a year like I think Josh Pate brought up this example. What if Utah is winning the Big 12 but they're 9-3, they're 8-3, right? They know they're going to the conference championship game, right? We've already established that, so they don't have to worry about the last. Let's say they're playing Central Florida in the last game of the regular season, right? So they're 8-3. They know the only way they're going to the playoff is winning their conference, right? They can
Yeah,
already see they're not gonna, they're not probably not going to get an at-large bid. So in that last game against Central Florida, they just rest starters and rest up to get in the conference championship game. So that
possible.
is a possibility. But let's just go through that. Let's say that happens. Okay, so no one watches that game. Who cares? You know what I
Yeah, it's
mean?
not that big.
Like it's not going to make any difference.
So I
When
mean,
Mich
because college football has plenty of weeks where you're like, there's not a lot of good games. I'm not going to watch that much this weekend.
Yeah,
So yeah, this
exactly.
is just a matter of when the week pops up that it's like, I don't really want to watch this week.
Yeah, and there's going to be some complaining if Virginia Tech is 9-3 and wins the ACC. There's going to be complaining about stuff like that, and that stuff might happen. But to me, I think that's okay. I don't think that's and I think upsets in the conference championship game that could create some problems. But I just think overall this is going to work really well. And I don't think there's going to be very many games. It's like, oh, well, this game doesn't really matter anymore. You
Well,
know,
but think about it this way: if you're like, if you get to the conference championship game and like you have, I mean, let's see, like you have one loss and you lose the conference championship game, but you've had a really good resume up to that point, you could still potentially get in. And we've
yeah,
already saw that
that's
in the 14 playoff, like the team that gets loses, they can still get in.
right.
So yeah, I mean, again, it's going to depend on your resume and some other stuff. So you know, but
Yeah,
then that's kind of interesting because then you get like, instead of them getting the automatic bid, they go in as one of the at-large teams. So then they're playing, like they're playing earlier. So that's like, okay, that's kind of cool.
yeah, I think there's advantages and drawbacks to everything, but I think overall I think this is going to work. I think as a product it's going to be awesome, and I just don't think it's not like when again when Auburn plays Alabama, I don't care what the records are. It's going to be a huge game. Everyone's going to be excited. When Michigan plays Ohio State, it's not going to be, "Oh, let's rest starters. We're playing them next week anyway." You know.
No, no,
So I just they're going to cuz those games really matter. So if this was a sport where we didn't have rivalries and everybody didn't have like if we didn't have these interconference things, it would be different. But we have it, so
yeah.
we can't really complain about it. All right. So, did you want to? Well, we can do one of two things, Clark. We can talk about the college football class action lawsuit, or we can go through my sports sympathy rankings.
Let's do the sympathy rankings.
Okay, so let me just explain what I did here. So I went through sport. I thought about this the other day because I think about this a lot of times when the Boston Celtics recently won the title, and anytime a Boston team wins the title, it's kind of like I know Boston fans want to be excited about it, but it's like you guys win championships constantly. Like honestly, like in this century, they have what I think it's uh 13 championships in the 21st century.
Yeah,
Okay. So that's 24 years. You got 13 titles. Like you guys win them all the time. You've already got the greatest basketball team. You have the most championships in basketball, right? You had the greatest dynasty basically ever, 50, 60 years ago,
yeah. Nobody
and
else is close to that number. Like
right.
no other city is close to that number amount of
Right. So I'm
titles.
just sitting there thinking, man, I have no sympathy for them. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if I ranked, I went by sports cities because I thought that was the best way to do it because you combine all the sports. What sports cities do I have the least sympathy for, and what sports cities do I have the most sympathy for? Because I thought it would be fun. So I just kind of went through and ran some numbers here. So let's go. We're gonna go with the teams I feel the most sympathy for first, and then we'll go with the teams that I just have I couldn't care less about their plight. I put Buffalo number one
Okay.
because they've been to the Super Bowl. The football team's been to the Super Bowl 4 times. The hockey team's been to the NHL Finals once. They've been to 5 AFC Championship games and still don't have a championship. And Buffalo is always they're on the north side of New York State. So people I feel like they kind of get ignored because all the other stuff is going on around them. And it's they have some rough weather to deal with. Obviously most of the places I picked have some rough weather to deal with, but I just man, Buffalo's the team. Like if they won the Bills win the title next year, I'd be like, great, man. I have no qualms about them winning anything. And Clark, you just interrupt me whenever you feel like
Yeah,
it.
no,
But
no. That's. I mean, I would totally agree. I mean, yeah, I would. Yeah, there's no. I mean, given how they, I mean, the 13 seconds game and wide right and 4 years in a row, and they finally get, after Jim Kelly retires, they finally get a franchise quarterback who's actually elite, and they got to deal with Patrick Mahomes. So it's just like, yeah, that's tough.
yeah, it's rough. And then I went after that. I went with Minnesota or Minneapolis, even though it's not anyway nowhere near as bad as Buffalo. They've got the two. The last time any of their teams won the title was 1991. They won. They won
Right.
two World Series, 1987, 1991. But they've been to the Super Bowl 4 times, lost every time. They've been to 6 conference championship games. Most famously, the 1998 Vikings, who were the greatest offense ever with Randy Moss and lost in overtime.
Then they had Brett
Um,
Favre, and he threw that stupid interception
right,
over the
Brett
middle. They
Favre
should
in
have made the Super
2000,
Bowl.
2012, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's they've Minnesota's had a rough time. The basketball team, they finally is pretty good again. They made it to, they made it to the second round this year, but they made the conference finals once, and
Well, they made the
that's it.
conference finals last year, right?
No, no. The
They made it.
conference finals last year was you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Minnesota Dallas. Yeah. So they made the
Yeah.
conference finals last year in 2004, and
Yeah.
that's it in the history of that franchise. And the Twins have made the playoffs a bunch of times, but haven't really gotten close
Yeah.
to the World Series again. So yeah, I feel like Minneapolis is really snake bit. I mean, the 4 trips to the Super Bowl, the stupid things that have gone wrong for them when they've had a chance to get there in football or
Yeah.
basketball.
And there
So
was this whole thing. One of the Super Bowls, I saw this like I was watching a YouTube video. Like there was a whole thing about one of the Super Bowls. I don't remember exactly where it was, but like where they had the Vikings practicing was like a high school thing or whatever. So like they had to drive, a long way to get to the practice field or something like that. And there's some, that kind of threw them off. I think they were playing. Was that one of them? That might have been one against the Dolphins. I'm not sure. But they of course they lost. I mean, they had Fran Tarkenton, who was one of the best quarterbacks you've ever seen. Um, I mean, for people who don't, that's like, you know, old school Russell Wilson or something. I mean, that's like his
yeah,
whole.
they had that Minnesota team in the 70s, Clark. I mean, you want to talk about a team that was really awesome that just never won anything. Like, Bud Grant was one of the best coaches ever. Fran Tarkenton, all the records Fran Tarkenton set that Dan Marino ended up breaking later. He was the one that did all that. Like their defense was unbelievable. So they had in the 70s the Vikings were, that was one of the best franchises in the NFL, and it just every time they got to the Super Bowl, it just did not,
Yeah.
didn't go their way. So yeah, Minneapolis has had that's a tough deal. Um, the next one, I mean, it's tough
Cleveland.
for me. Like it was between Detroit and Cincinnati. And I mean, Detroit, obviously the football teams, they made it to the NFC Championship game this year, but they've hardly won any playoff games in their history, especially recent history in the last 40 or 50 years. But the Pistons do have 3 NBA titles. They haven't won it in 20 years, but they do have 3 of those. And they made it to the Tigers made it to the World Series, I think, in 2006.
They
But
made
they
it again.
lost. Yeah,
They made it
yeah.
again after that. They lost again.
Yeah, yeah. So they
I don't
they
remember
haven't been
against
able to win the World Series. But yeah, Detroit is when especially when you talk about this century, Detroit, yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
they were
bad,
really bad.
pretty rough. So yeah, that's a tough deal. Cincinnati, they just made the Super Bowl recently, so I guess I'd probably put them below Detroit for that reason.
Yeah, but I mean, I mean, I don't even know they have. I mean, they only have a football team and a baseball team.
Baseball.
Yeah, they don't have basketball or hockey. Um, although are the Columbus Blue Jackets still a thing, or is it?
Yeah, they're in Columbus. Yeah, not in
Yeah,
Cincinnati.
that's kind of far. Is
That's
that
not
far?
yeah, it's not Cincinnati. It's
Yeah,
not yeah, it's not anywhere near Cincinnati. Yeah, so yeah, I think that, and the Bengals have been to the Super Bowl 3 times, I believe, twice in the
yeah,
80s and then once recently. And the Cincinnati Reds won the World Series in 1990, so 34 years ago. So
yeah,
yeah, Cincinnati hasn't been certainly hasn't been great. And the Bengals were for a long time the Bengals were kind of bad. And so yeah, they've definitely had a rough go of it. Um, After that, I put Phoenix in there because I just feel like Phoenix is kind of they've made the finals 3 times in their history, and they just it feels like all 3 times it's like, man, they really could have won. 76 is the most really famous NBA finals with the against the Celtics where the game went into triple overtime. Like they were right there, like literally that game could have gone either way. And they, easily, if they win that game, they probably win that series. 93, that's just Barkley going up against Jordan. So they just, they had a chance to win that series, couldn't pull it off because they're playing against Jordan. And then in 2021, when they made it again, it's like, we're watching the series. It's like, man, we feel like a couple of plays here and there, and they could have won. You know, the Arizona Cardinals made it to the Super Bowl once with the Kurt Warner team. So that was and that was a pretty close game. So they were pretty close. But yeah, I just I feel like they're on this list because they've been successful enough and haven't been able to get the job done and had some disappointing losses. So I definitely have some sympathy
Yeah.
for them.
So Cleveland would be number 8.
Yeah, Cleveland. Yeah, I mean, obviously Cleveland should be on the list, right? But they've got the NBA title in the last decade. So it's the Cleveland Browns obviously haven't won anything since before the merger.
Well, but I
So
mean, I would just sit with Cleveland. I mean, look, you had 2 times where you could have made the Super Bowl, and John Elway just, I mean, you had a fumble one time, and then you just, the drive, um, and
yeah,
then
the Indians have made the World Series 3 times.
that's true, and they lost every one of them,
Right.
and they got it to Game 7 one time, they lost to the Braves, um, and I mean, God, they were up 3-1 on the Red Sox in '07, and they lost the series in the ALCS. Um, And then let's see the Browns. I mean, okay, so they made it to the AFC Championship game those couple times. Then the team kind of petered out. They had Belichick, and then they moved, so they
Right.
didn't even have a team for a few years. They get the team back. I think they made the playoffs, and then they were just a dumpster fire for the better part of 20 years. And now they're actually pretty good. They made the playoffs a couple times. They did win a playoff game, but just in terms of the history of that, and then just the I guess they're the Guardians now. I think they
I
changed.
don't. You know what it is? I don't think I put anybody on the list that had won the title in the last decade. I think
Okay,
that's
all right,
what I think
I
that's what
guess
I
that's
did.
fair.
I think
In
that's why.
Cleveland, like they had some. They were pretty good in the '80s, and then in the '90s they were okay, and then they were kind of a mess. They got LeBron, and he got them to the finals. They won a championship, and now they got a good team now. They've made the playoffs a couple times. They signed Donovan Mitchell, so yeah, it's
And
I just think that I'm sympathetic for like the Browns because they moved
yeah.
and they didn't even have them, and they had those chances to make the Super Bowl and it didn't happen, and yeah, so and just all the oh, we got this quarterback, we got this quarterback, we got this coach, and it just never just it was always bad. So yeah, and then the Guardians, like they I don't know, they made it to the World Series against the Cubs. They were up 3-1, they lost. Like that's pretty they were, like I said, Game 7 against the Marlins, they lost that one. So
Yeah, Cleveland's had some rough losses.
yeah.
Definitely some rough losses. Now, I threw this one in, and people are going to tell me I'm an idiot, whatever. But New York. I mean, the Giants won the Super Bowl in 2011 or 2012, whatever. The
Yeah.
Yankees haven't won the World Series since 2009, right? The Jets. I mean, well, there's no point in talking
Yeah.
about the Jets. The Rangers haven't won the Cup since 1994. Islanders since 1984.
Yeah.
Like, they haven't won anything. 50, it's been almost 15 years now. So it's yeah, New York is going through some. I mean, I don't
The
want to say I have a
Giants are just bad. Like
yeah.
they signed Daniel Jones to that stupid contract. We're like, oh my god. The Mets are, I mean, they can't really get out of their
Okay,
own.
they made the World Series in 2015, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, and the thing is, it's hard to sit there and have sympathy for New York, when they have 27 World Series, and but the Knicks haven't won the title in 50 years. So I
Yeah.
mean, like the Knicks fans deserve some sympathy. I'll tell you that. I mean, it's been a rough go. So yeah, I put them on the list. I figured they would be down near the bottom. Um, Anybody else you can think of, Clark, that you have a good amount of
I'm
sympathy for?
trying to think of major cities. I mean, Atlanta, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean, the Hawks, like,
but they just won the World Series a couple years ago.
oh, that's true. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so you got the Braves, but I mean, the Falcons, they made it against the Elway
Yeah,
team. They got
Falcons had a
blown out. I mean, the 28-3. I mean, just, God, that's brutal. You have Michael Vick, and then the whole thing with the dogs, like, just, um, And then, I mean, yeah, the Braves, like I guess you can't have too much sympathy. I mean, the Braves were just really good for a while, and then things kind of petered out, and then they
but
retooled
they're
and
really good
they're
now.
pretty good. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a little bit tougher, but I mean, that's more just sympathy for the Falcons, I guess,
And,
and maybe
like,
Hawks.
I didn't expand a lot of this out to the college teams, right? I mean, if you look at Detroit, I mean, Michigan just won the title. I mean, University of
Yeah,
Michigan's pretty close to Detroit, right? University of Georgia won 2 titles in football, right?
yeah,
That's reasonably close to Atlanta. So I didn't really think too much about that, but yeah, I just feel like those are the ones, like, man, that's God, I mean, I don't. We could talk about Miami. Well, no, I couldn't put Miami on because of the three NBA titles in the last 20 years. So
yeah. And
I
then the
couldn't.
Marlins
The
won.
Marlins have
Well,
won
the Marlins
twice.
won in '03, but that is a while ago.
Yeah,
Um, and the
and
Heat
the
have made
Panthers
the
just won the
finals
cup.
a couple times. Yeah, they just
Yeah,
won the Stanley Cup, so yeah, it's kind of tough. That's more just like a Dolphins thing.
yeah, yeah. We talked about that before. The Dolphins are the only team that's lagging behind. All right, so teams I have no teams or cities I have no sympathy for. I mean, we talked about Boston already. I don't know what else I need to say. Suck it up, Boston. Like, I
Yeah,
really don't. I don't want to hear. Oh, it's listen. I'm glad you won. Celebrate. That's fantastic. But don't expect me to, like, bask in your glory or be really impressed with you. Like, for God's sakes. Like, you had the Patriots are the greatest dynasty in the history of sports for God knows how long. You got a Stanley Cup in there. You've got a couple NBA titles. You made the finals, handful of, 4 times in the last 20 years or whatever. You've the baseball team. I know the Red Sox aren't awesome now. By the way, well, that's the funny part. Like, I heard this on on one of the shows. Like, oh man, the Red Sox are terrible. The Red Sox are like 11 games over 500. They're doing fine. You know, like, they're not going to win the World Series this year, but they're fine. Like acting like the Red Sox aren't terrible. So it's just it's funny to me. The Bruins make the playoffs almost every year. The Celtics are competing for the title, and they will be for the near future. It looks like. The Patriots are in a rebuild. Okay, fine. You got you got 6 Super Bowls. Like, suck it up, Boston. So
yeah,
yeah, I just have there's just very zero sympathy for them. Like, you guys, like, enjoy it. I'm happy for you, but I don't want to hear about
yeah.
it. The next one I put down, like, I put Alabama. Like, because I mean, the football team, 6 titles in the last 17 years. They basically made the playoffs start in 2014. They basically made it almost every year. They're probably gonna make the 12-team playoff every single year. I know Nick Saban left, so yeah, okay. Maybe we can have some sympathy for you, but you got arguably the best young coach going now, Kalen DeBoer. So I think you'll be just fine. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy, and by the way, they've had previous eras. They had with Bear Bryant. They won it in the early '90s. Like, there's not a whole lot to feel bad about. And now the basketball team got good.
Yeah,
So yeah, I don't that one I thought was pretty, that fit the mold pretty well. Um, the next one I put San Francisco. So you had the Warriors, right? You had the Warriors dynasty, basically,
right.
right? You got the 4 titles out of that. You went
The
to the
Giants
finals
won 3 World
6 times. The
Series
Giants won 3 World Series in like
relatively
6 years.
recently.
You had the 49ers keep getting to the Super Bowl, and you had the previous era where they won 4 in a decade.
Yeah,
So
and they made one in 2012, so or 13, whatever it was.
yeah, exactly. So no, I don't. I certainly don't feel bad. The Warriors are basically printing money from their new arena. So I know that Oakland's kind of a mess, and they're probably moving. So maybe maybe I have a little bit of sympathy for you because of that. But yeah, San Francisco, I don't feel like I'm. Yeah. I wish they would have won one of the Super Bowls. The Garoppolo one, or this year. Like, that would have been. I would have been happy for you if that happened. But the Warriors won the title in 22. So,
Yeah, it's
and
kind
you
of
still have Steph Curry. Like, it's not like you're, most teams, any organization would kill to have that guy. So, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy. Um, Next I put Dallas. I'm sorry, not Dallas, Kansas City. Just on the strength of they got the best quarterback, in the world for the
they've
next
won 3.
decade.
They're going to keep winning more.
Right. They've
Like,
won 3. They're going to win more. They got a World Series in 15.
yeah,
So they're and their team, the baseball team, looks like it's pretty good this year. They don't have a whole lot. Those are only 2 sports really. they have a soccer team, but
Right.
they don't have a hockey or a,
Well, well,
basketball team.
yeah, I guess because St. Louis and Kansas, those are far. They're not right next to each other.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So yeah.
Yeah, because
So
with St. Louis, we'd say the Cardinals and the Blues. And yeah, right. Okay.
yeah. Um the next one I put, and this is kind of mean, but I put Dallas because you know what? Yeah, I know they haven't won in forever, but you're the premier franchise. Like if all the sports franchises in the world went on sale, the Cowboys might get the most money. I know that doesn't help the fans, but the Texas Rangers did this just win the World Series, which
Yep.
they're pretty close to Dallas.
The Mavericks just went to the finals. They've got
Mavericks
one
just
of the
went to
best
the
players in the league.
finals. And they got Luca. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the Cowboys, they shoot their mouth off a lot and they don't really do anything, but we have to talk about them on every single show. There has to be a
Yeah.
Cowboys segment anytime you talk about NFL. And so it's just, no, I don't really have a whole lot of sympathy for you. I'm tired of talking about you. I'm tired of hearing about you. Honestly, you
Yeah.
could go away for a little while. It'd be just fine. Um, let's see. I put Los Angeles just because Los Angeles doesn't really care that much. Like
Yeah.
they're totally okay. The Lakers won the title in the bubble. The Rams just won the Super Bowl a few years ago. The Dodgers won the World Series in I think they won the COVID year.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, and then fans only show up when the team wins. And now Lincoln Riley looks like he's probably going to get USC going. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for you anyway. You live out in really nice weather and it's beautiful every day. So yeah, I know I live in Florida, but California is a different that's a different animal. And then the last one, I felt like I had to throw this in at the end, was Houston, because the baseball team cheated, won the World Series, won their second World Series. We all know they cheated. It's never going to be really taken seriously. I don't know about, the football team starting to turn it around. I guess they had the Deshaun Watson thing, so I guess I could have some sympathy for them. But yeah, I was
Yeah.
just basically pointing at the baseball team, basically like, you guys have two World Series that we're all kind of like, yeah, I don't know, that we all kind of think are not legitimate.
Yeah.
So, anybody else you want to put out there that you have no sympathy for? I
No,
mean,
I think that
it's
kind of
basically
covers.
the big brands. I guess that's
Yeah.
basically the deal, with
Yeah. I
that.
mean, I guess you could. I mean, but you could throw the Packers in there or something. But I don't have any problems with the Packers. You know, you could throw this. You could throw the Steelers in there, I guess. But I mean, the hockey teams won like 3 Stanley Cups, and then the football team. Granted, the last one they won, the last Super Bowl was like 15 years ago. But I mean, they don't lose. They never have a losing record. They keep making the playoffs. So and they've got those 6 Super Bowls. So yeah, it's kind of hard to But I don't. I mean, I don't really have a problem with the Steelers or the Packers. Like I don't. You know. I mean, those fan bases just seems kind of like they're like the Packers. It's just like, yeah, this is our team. Yeah, we only won 2 Super Bowls with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, but we keep showing up when we really like our team. So I don't.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like a real awesome existence. I guess I should not have a whole lot of sympathy for Packer fans, but there's nothing unlikable about the
Yeah, I don't.
Packers.
I
You
don't
know,
really have a problem. I mean,
it's hard to just like it's like not liking Seattle or something. It's like they're fine. I don't know why would I why would I
yeah,
have a problem with them?
yeah, you could have
Yeah,
some sympathy for Seattle because they took the basketball team away. So
yeah. That's a good point. I didn't factor that. I could have factored
but
that
I
in a
mean,
little bit.
I don't know. They've been pretty good, recently. So the Seahawks. So
Yep.
I don't know. It's hard. And plus, what they got the Seahawks. They had the basketball team. The baseball team. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you could. The baseball team just has never. You know, they had that one year they won 116 games and they couldn't even make it to the World Series. So
Yeah. All right. So
all right.
let's I mean real quick, I'll just run through this. I was reading a little bit about this before we came on the podcast. So some of the one of the big lawsuits that the college athletes had was settled. um and basically there's some rules that are going to be put in place about how teams paying players, and they're going to be able to start that next year. They settled on a number, like, which again is like, the thing with college sports, and I guess the main point that I'm making here is that, um, Clark, I don't think there's ever going to be a resolution when it comes to college athletes and getting paid. Or I don't think there's going to be like a, oh, these are the rules and we're good with it and we move forward with this. I think it's just going to be constant lawsuits, and we're constantly going to be adjusting every so often. But basically, a lot of things happened with this lawsuit. They basically said, like, the school can give out as many athletic scholarships as they want, but there's roster limits. So basically, there in football, there's 85 scholarships, and then you could have walk-ons or whatever. Now you're going to be allowed to have 105 players in your football team, and that's it. You can give all of them a scholarship. You can give none of them a scholarship. You can give 42 of them a scholarship, 86 of them a scholarship, whatever you want to do, as long as it doesn't go over 105. So the other thing was that a lot of the athletes that, especially the ones that were involved in the class action, like, they're going to get paid. Like, they're going to get recoup some of the money that they would have made otherwise. And so, yeah, it sets up a lot of things. And I'm not going to go into crazy amounts of detail, but that was my overall point, Clark, was that I don't see, like, everybody's like, oh man, we guardrails and blah blah. And yeah, I do agree we need to have some kind of basis for what we do. But they came up with the basis for how the schools are going to pay the athletes by just some random. So they basically said, like, in professional sports, like most of them, football, basketball, the players get 50% of the revenue. So they basically said, well, because these schools are paying for your education and all of that other stuff, we're going to allow these schools to spend 23.1% of their money on the athletes specifically. And then basically the school can come up with a contract with the player to use their name, image, and likeness. So it kind of simplifies it a little bit. But I don't know that. I don't think it's going to change anything. I think it's great, but I don't think this changes anything. I don't think this makes the good teams better. I don't think this changes the balance of power in any, in any of these sports. I don't think it really makes a whole lot of difference. I just think the colleges are going to have to come up with a way to make more money, so they can pay out the scholarships or pay out the whatever sport they want to be competitive in, to
Yeah.
be able to pay for it. But I don't think anything's ever gonna be resolved, Clark. I think it's just gonna be they're just gonna keep getting lawsuits that, maybe unless the government comes up with some kind of legislation. But I don't know, man. I don't think 10 years from now it's gonna be a whole lot different. Now maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it'll gradually change it. Maybe I should think about that, a little more rationally. Maybe 10 years from now, yeah, it will be different, but it's just gonna be these gradual changes that
Yeah,
are
that's
kicking and
probably,
screaming the whole way. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
yeah. 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 We'll see how, I mean, again, it'll just be, there'll be continual things that are happening. So, it's interesting,
Yeah, and again, listening to the College Football Inquirer podcast, they're complaining. Dan Wetzel's worried about competitive balance, and oh man, there's not going to be enough. And it's like, college football's never had competitive balance, and it never will.
Yeah.
Like, giving 20, and the thing is, Clark, after you get to 85 players, the last 20 guys on your team are like walk-ons or whatever. So now the only difference is the guys that are walking onto your team, you can give them a scholarship if you want.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's, and it's the last 20 guys on your team. Who cares about the last 20 guys on your team?
Yeah.
And if they want to play and there's a spot for them to play in another school, they're going to transfer there.
Yeah.
It's not like they're stuck. So yeah, I just don't. I think it's fine. Dabo Sweeney, of course, comes out and he's the first guy to start complaining about it. He wants to have his walk-ons or whatever, and it's like, yeah, but most of the walk-ons now, they get paid. They get their tuition paid for with NIL money. So it's not like, they're basically, so now we're just going to change where the money comes from, which it was really coming from the school anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
kind of,
Dabo Sweeney needs to, it's like, dude, times are changing. You need to adapt. And by the way, why are you coming out complaining about these other things? How about you win more games? How about you do that? How about you get on board with the transfer portal and all this other stuff that's causing you to get left behind?
Yeah. And it's like, I just think, isn't that great though? You can give all these guys that were walk ons on your team, you can give them scholarships now.
Yeah,
That seems like a good thing to me. You
right.
know, maybe I'm crazy. It's like, oh, well, all these major schools are going to take over the sport. Have you watched the sport ever?
When were they not in control? I don't understand.
I don't understand. Like, what are you talking about? This just in: Iowa will never beat out Ohio State in recruiting. Okay, they're never going to have better players. That's never the way it's going to work. Just it's
Yeah,
okay. We can all deal with it. It'll be just fine. And this year will be awesome in college football. And when more money comes pouring in and the ratings are soaring, I really don't want to hear any of this
right.
nonsense. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, Clark, looking forward to it, man. I was looking at some of the college football games that are coming up, and I think it's gonna be a really fun year.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a month away. So
And hopefully in the Olympics, the basketball team will take the gold. I saw they watched their game. They won today against Serbia. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. But I kind of feel like we're just going to win, and it's going to be pretty unconvincing. So
yeah,
anyway, all right, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Next episode, if we got some comments, we'll read some of those. And check out my YouTube channel. I'm putting up some Super Mario 3 speed runs, and having some fun with that. So, all right, thanks everybody.